Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely exhausted, even though the other person never raised their voice, never insulted you directly, and seemed incredibly kind? You replay the interaction in your mind, trying to understand why something feels off. On the surface, everything looked healthy. They smiled. They complimented you. They offered to help. They said all the right things. Yet deep inside, you felt smaller, more obligated, more confused, or somehow responsible for their happiness. That uncomfortable feeling is often the first clue that kindness is being used as a mask rather than an expression of genuine love. One of the most difficult realities to accept is that appearances can be deceiving. We naturally associate kindness with goodness. We believe that someone who speaks softly must have a gentle heart. We assume that a generous person has pure motives. We expect people who constantly help others to be trustworthy. While many genuinely kind people deserve that trust, there are also individuals who understand the power of appearing nice. They know that if they can build a reputation for kindness, few people will question their behavior. Their image becomes their greatest defense, allowing manipulation to hide in plain sight. This type of manipulation is especially dangerous because it doesn't look like manipulation. It doesn't arrive with threats or obvious intimidation. Instead, it arrives wrapped in compliments, favors, sympathy, and constant reassurance. The toxic individual studies what makes people feel safe and then imitates those behaviors. They know that if they appear generous enough, people will overlook the subtle moments of control. If they seem caring enough, others may dismiss the warning signs as misunderstandings rather than recognizing unhealthy patterns. At first, their attention feels flattering. They always seem available. They remember small details about your life. They offer help before you even ask. They tell you how much they value you and how special you are. None of these actions are wrong by themselves. In healthy relationships, genuine care often looks exactly like this. The difference isn't found in the action itself, but in the motive behind it. Healthy kindness expects nothing in return. Manipulative kindness quietly keeps score. The moment kindness becomes a transaction, the relationship begins to change. The favors are no longer gifts, they become silent contracts. The support they offered freely now carries invisible expectations. One day they remind you of everything they've done for you. They mention the sacrifices they made, the time they invested, or the opportunities they gave up. Suddenly, what once felt like generosity becomes a source of pressure. You begin feeling guilty for wanting independence because it seems as though you owe them something. Many people miss this transition because it happens gradually. There isn't a dramatic shift overnight. Instead, small moments accumulate over time. You start apologizing more than usual. You hesitate before making decisions without consulting them. You worry about disappointing them, even when you've done nothing wrong. Their approval begins to matter more than your own peace of mind. Little by little, your freedom is exchanged for emotional obligation, and you may not even realize it is happening. Another reason this form of manipulation is so effective is because the person rarely behaves badly in public. Around other people, they remain charming, generous, thoughtful, and dependable. Friends admire them, family members praise them, coworkers describe them as incredibly supportive. Because everyone else sees their pleasant side, you begin doubting your own experiences. You wonder if you're simply being too sensitive. You question whether you're imagining the tension that exists behind closed doors. This self-doubt becomes another tool that keeps the manipulation alive. A toxic person who hides behind kindness often understands that controlling your emotions is easier than controlling your actions. They don't always need to tell you what to do. They simply influence how you feel until you choose the outcome they wanted all along. They may express disappointment instead of making demands. They may sigh instead of arguing. They may become unusually quiet until you feel compelled to fix the situation. They rarely force you directly because indirect control is much harder to identify. Perhaps one of the greatest dangers is how this kind of manipulation reshapes your identity. Without realizing it, you begin defining yourself by your ability to keep them happy. Your worth becomes connected to meeting their expectations. You start believing that saying no makes you selfish, that prioritizing your own needs is unkind, or that setting boundaries means you don't appreciate everything they've done for you. Over time, you become so focused on protecting their feelings that you lose touch with your own. Healthy relationships create freedom. They encourage honesty without fear. They celebrate individuality rather than demanding conformity. Genuine kindness allows people to disagree without punishment. It respects boundaries instead of resisting them. It gives generously without maintaining an emotional ledger. It offers support because love delights in serving, not because service creates leverage. When kindness is authentic, it produces peace. When kindness is a disguise, it produces anxiety. Discernment grows when you stop evaluating relationships by appearances alone. Instead of asking whether someone seems nice, begin asking whether their actions consistently produce trust, respect, freedom, and emotional safety. Notice how you feel after spending time with them. Do you feel encouraged to become your authentic self, or do you feel pressured to become the version they prefer? Do they celebrate your growth even when it means they become less central in your life? Or do they subtly resist your independence while insisting they only want what's best for you? Real love does not require manipulation to survive. It doesn't demand constant repayment, emotional indebtedness, or unquestioning loyalty. It understands that healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect, honest communication, and freedom rather than hidden control. The more you learn to recognize the difference between genuine kindness and kindness used as a mask, the more confidently you can protect your peace, honor your values, and invest your trust in relationships that strengthen rather than quietly diminish the person you were created to be. One of the most confusing experiences a person can have is realizing that someone who appears deeply caring is actually exercising subtle control. Most of us have been taught to recognize manipulation through obvious warning signs such as anger, intimidation, criticism, or threats. We expect unhealthy people to behave aggressively or openly selfishly, but manipulation is often far more sophisticated than that. In many cases, it arrives disguised as compassion, concern, protection, or unwavering support. It speaks softly instead of loudly. It smiles instead of frowns. It convinces rather than commands. That is precisely why it is so difficult to recognize. A toxic person who has mastered this approach understands that people naturally lower their defenses around those who seem caring. When someone says, "I'm only worried about you," our first instinct is to believe them. When they say, "I just want what's best for you," we assume their motives are pure. Those phrases are not inherently unhealthy. In healthy relationships, they can express genuine love and concern. The problem arises when those words become tools for controlling another person's choices instead of supporting their freedom. Imagine someone who consistently questions your decisions but frames every criticism as concern. They don't say, "I don't trust your judgment." Instead, they ask, "Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm just looking out for you." They don't openly discourage your dreams. Instead, they repeatedly highlight every possible risk until your confidence begins to disappear. They don't forbid you from spending time with certain people. Instead, they suggest that those friends may not truly care about you and gently encourage you to distance yourself. On the surface, each conversation sounds thoughtful and protective. Over time, however, you find yourself making fewer independent decisions because their voice has become louder than your own. This kind of manipulation works because it slowly shifts your trust away from yourself. Instead of developing confidence in your own wisdom, you begin relying on the manipulative person for reassurance before making even small choices. They position themselves as the safest source of guidance while quietly weakening your belief in your own judgment. Eventually, you may reach a point where acting independently feels uncomfortable because you have become accustomed to seeking their approval first. Another common strategy involves excessive helping. At first glance, there seems to be nothing wrong with someone who constantly offers assistance. They volunteer before anyone else. They solve your problems. They rescue you from difficult situations. They insist that you should never struggle alone because they are always there for you. Genuine generosity is a beautiful quality, but manipulation begins when helping creates dependency rather than empowerment. Healthy support equips people to stand on their own feet. Manipulative support keeps people leaning on someone else indefinitely. Instead of encouraging your growth, the toxic individual quietly becomes essential to every area of your life. They may handle your responsibilities, make decisions for you, or insert themselves into situations where you could have succeeded independently. As a result, you gradually lose confidence in your own abilities while believing you simply have someone who cares deeply about you. Emotional caretaking can also become a subtle form of manipulation. Some individuals consistently present themselves as emotionally fragile, making others feel responsible for protecting their feelings. They rarely make direct demands. Instead, they express sadness, disappointment, or loneliness whenever you prioritize your own needs. They may never say, "You can't spend time with your friends." Instead, they sigh and remark, "I guess I'll just be here by myself tonight." They may not forbid you from pursuing opportunities, but they quietly remind you how much they will miss you or how difficult life will become without your presence. Because these responses appear vulnerable rather than controlling, many people mistake manipulation for emotional honesty. They assume they are simply caring for someone they love. In reality, they are slowly being conditioned to ignore their own needs in order to prevent another person's emotional discomfort. Over time, this creates a relationship built not on mutual respect, but on obligation and guilt. Another reason this behavior remains hidden is that manipulative people often mix genuine acts of kindness with subtle control. They may truly care about certain aspects of your life. They may sincerely celebrate some of your successes. They may perform generous acts that are completely real. This mixture makes the unhealthy patterns much harder to identify because the relationship is not entirely negative. There are moments of warmth, affection, laughter, and support. Those positive experiences make you question yourself whenever something feels wrong. This emotional inconsistency creates confusion. One day they encourage you, and the next day they subtly discourage your independence. One moment they praise your abilities, and another moment they suggest you cannot succeed without them. This cycle keeps you searching for the version of them that feels safe while overlooking the behaviors that quietly diminish your confidence. Instead of recognizing manipulation, you become focused on restoring harmony. Perhaps the greatest danger is that manipulation disguised as care teaches you to distrust your own emotional signals. Deep inside, you may sense that something feels unhealthy, yet you immediately dismiss those feelings because the other person appears so loving. You tell yourself that caring people cannot be controlling. You assume your discomfort must come from your own insecurities rather than from the relationship itself. This constant self-questioning weakens your discernment and allows unhealthy dynamics to continue much longer than they otherwise would. Healthy care never requires you to surrender your identity. It never asks you to abandon your values, silence your voice, or sacrifice your peace in order to preserve someone else's comfort. Genuine love encourages maturity, confidence, wisdom, and personal growth. It celebrates your ability to think independently and make responsible decisions. It provides guidance without demanding control. It offers advice without requiring obedience. It respects your boundaries because real love understands that freedom strengthens relationships rather than threatening them. Learning to recognize the difference between authentic care and disguised manipulation requires paying attention not only to what people say, but also to the long-term effect their presence has on your life. Ask yourself whether their support leaves you stronger, wiser, and more confident, or whether it leaves you increasingly uncertain, dependent, and afraid of disappointing them. True kindness strengthens your ability to stand with confidence, while manipulation wrapped in kindness slowly convinces you that you cannot stand without the person who claims to care the most.